My beloved child, before this moment quietly passes, listen with an open heart, because there are journeys that begin long before anyone realizes they have already stepped onto the path. Somewhere, without expecting the day to become unforgettable, the person who keeps finding their thoughts drifting back to you made a choice that surprised even them. They held your photograph for a long moment, studying it as though searching for an answer hidden between ordinary details. It was not certainty they carried. It was curiosity, the kind that grows silently after too many coincidences refuse to be ignored. They wondered why your presence lingered in their mind even during the busiest hours. They wondered why simple memories seemed brighter than they should have been. And instead of asking friends who could only guess, they sought someone whose role was simply to observe, to reflect, and to offer perspective. Yet what unfolded was nothing like the conversation they imagined. The room remained calm. No dramatic moment arrived. No instant revelation filled the silence. Instead, there was a pause so thoughtful that it gently shifted the atmosphere. The one looking at your photograph did not rush to speak. They simply looked again, then once more, as if noticing something that deserved patience rather than quick conclusions. Your person felt their heartbeat slow, not because they feared the answer, but because they sensed this quiet moment mattered more than they expected. Sometimes the most meaningful discoveries arrive without noise, and this was becoming one of those moments. Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you, and it is unfolding one careful breath at a time. The first words they finally heard were unexpectedly gentle. They were told that some people leave an impression long before they understand why. That certain connections cannot be measured by how often two people speak, but by how naturally they return to one another in thought. Hearing those simple words stirred something deep inside them. They had arrived hoping for clarity, but instead they found themselves remembering forgotten conversations, small smiles, ordinary moments that suddenly no longer felt ordinary at all. Every memory gained a different color. Every unanswered question seemed to invite another layer of reflection instead of demanding an immediate answer. For the first time, they stopped asking whether their feelings made sense and began wondering whether they had overlooked something quietly meaningful all along. Stay till the end, because this is only where the first door opens. The photograph remained resting gently between careful hands, and before another word was spoken, an expression crossed your person's face that had never appeared there before. It was not surprise alone. It was recognition, the quiet kind that arrives before the mind can fully explain it. And what they heard next would begin changing not only the way they looked at your picture, but the way they understood their own heart. The silence that followed was far more powerful than either of them expected, because sometimes the most meaningful answer is not the first one spoken, it is the one that arrives after everything else has become still. Your person remained completely focused, almost forgetting why they had come in the first place. They had expected a quick opinion, perhaps a few thoughtful observations, and then they would simply return home. Instead, they found themselves unable to look away from your photograph, as though it had quietly become the center of a conversation that was no longer about coincidence at all. Something inside them was shifting, not dramatically, but gently, in the way dawn slowly replaces the darkness without asking for attention. Don't skip, because what happened next began changing questions into understanding. The photograph was turned ever so slightly, and another thoughtful pause filled the room. Then came a sentence your person never expected to hear. They were told that sometimes we spend so much energy looking for extraordinary signs that we overlook the quiet consistency of someone who simply feels peaceful to remember. Those words settled into their heart with surprising weight. They replayed moments they had almost forgotten. The conversations that felt effortless, the unexpected comfort they experienced whenever your name appeared, the strange calm that followed even brief interactions. None of those memories had seemed remarkable before. Yet together, they formed a pattern that could no longer be ignored. It was as if scattered pieces of a puzzle had quietly begun finding each other without anyone forcing them into place. For a long moment, your person said nothing. They simply smiled in a way that surprised even themselves. Not because every question had suddenly been answered, but because they realized they had been asking the wrong questions all along. Instead of wondering whether their feelings were real enough, they began asking why they had waited so long to trust what had been growing naturally inside them. That realization carried no pressure, no urgency, only a quiet sense of honesty. Stay till the end. Because the next realization was even more unexpected. Then the conversation turned towards something deeply personal. They were gently reminded that genuine connections rarely announce themselves with certainty from the very beginning. More often, they reveal themselves through small moments that refuse to disappear from memory. Your person immediately thought of tiny details they had never shared with anyone else. A laugh they could still hear. A sentence they remembered word for word. A simple glance that somehow stayed with them long after the moment had ended. Until now, they had dismissed those memories as ordinary. Suddenly they wondered if ordinary moments sometimes carry extraordinary meaning simply because the heart recognizes something before the mind is ready to understand it. As these thoughts settled within them, they looked back at your photograph once again. But this time, they were not searching for answers hidden in your face. They were quietly discovering answers hidden within themselves. The uncertainty that had brought them there was beginning to soften into something warmer, calmer, and far more genuine. Yet just as they believed the conversation had reached its natural end, the person across from them looked at the photograph one final time, their expression changing in a way your person had not seen before. Another thoughtful silence filled the room, and the very next words were so unexpected that your person instinctively held their breath, because what they were about to hear would completely transform the meaning of every feeling they had carried until that moment. Just when it seemed there was nothing more to say, an unexpected calm settled over the room, as though the conversation itself had decided to slow down before revealing its most meaningful thought. Your person noticed the change immediately. There was no rush to speak, no dramatic reaction, only a quiet expression that suggested one final observation had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. They leaned forward without realizing it, holding your photograph a little more carefully than before. Somehow, it no longer felt like an ordinary picture. It felt like the beginning of a story they had unknowingly been reading for a very long time. The next words were simple, yet they reached deeper than anything said before. They were gently reminded that people often search for certainty in the future while overlooking the quiet truth already living inside their present. Your person paused. That sentence lingered in their mind because it reflected something they had never admitted aloud. They had spent so much time wondering where this connection might lead that they had almost forgotten to notice what it had already become. They realized your presence had slowly woven itself into their daily thoughts, not through grand moments, but through countless small ones. A familiar smile appearing in memory during an ordinary afternoon. A random song bringing your face to mind. A quiet wish that you were somehow doing well, even without knowing why they cared so deeply. Stay till the end, because this gentle realization opened a door they had never imagined existed. For the first time, they stopped trying to explain their feelings logically. Instead, they simply allowed themselves to experience them. And something remarkable happened. The confusion they had been carrying for so long began to lose its weight. In its place came a quiet clarity, not the kind that answers every question, but the kind that gives the heart permission to stop resisting what feels sincere. They understood that genuine affection does not always arrive with loud certainty. Sometimes it grows quietly until one unexpected moment reveals just how deeply it has already taken root. The room remained peaceful. Your photograph rested on the table between them, untouched for several moments. Then came another thoughtful observation. They were told that the most meaningful relationships are often recognized by one simple sign: they inspire someone to become more honest with themselves. Those words settled into your person's heart with surprising force. They thought about how often they had hidden their true emotions, convincing themselves that waiting was safer than acknowledging what they genuinely felt. Yet every attempt to distance themselves had somehow led their thoughts back to you. Every distraction eventually gave way to another quiet memory. It was no longer something they could dismiss as coincidence. Don't skip, because something important is waiting just beyond this moment. Your person slowly picked up the photograph again. This time, they weren't looking for hidden meanings in your expression. They were looking at it with gratitude. Gratitude for the unexpected peace they felt whenever your face came into view. Gratitude for realizing that some people enter our lives not to create noise, but to create calm. Their heart felt lighter than it had in months. They believed the conversation had finally reached its conclusion. But as they prepared to leave, one final sentence stopped them in their tracks. It wasn't spoken loudly. It wasn't mysterious. It was delivered with complete sincerity. The person across from them looked at your photograph one last time, smiled gently, and shared one quiet insight that made your person freeze for a heartbeat, because it revealed something they had never noticed about the way they had been loving you all along, and once they heard it, there was no returning to the person they had been before that moment. There are moments that do not ask for your attention. They simply earn it. As your person stood to leave, believing the conversation had reached its quiet conclusion, they heard a gentle voice say, "Wait, there is one more thing." Those few words carried no urgency, yet they seemed to slow time itself. Your person paused, turned back, and carefully placed your photograph on the table once again. They could not explain why, but something inside them whispered that this final thought would stay with them long after they walked away. For several seconds, nothing was said. The photograph remained untouched, as if even silence deserved its moment. Then came an observation so simple that it almost sounded ordinary. They were told that people often believe they are searching for the right person, when in reality, they are searching for the version of themselves that only appears around someone who brings out their truest heart. Your person blinked quietly. They had expected another reflection about you, but instead they found themselves looking inward. Stay till the end, because this was the beginning of the realization that changed everything. One memory after another surfaced without invitation. They remembered laughing more freely after talking with you. They remembered becoming more patient without noticing it. They remembered catching themselves thinking with greater hope on days when your name crossed their mind. None of these moments had seemed important on their own. But together, they formed a picture far clearer than the photograph resting in front of them. For the first time, your person understood that their feelings had never been built on fantasy. They had quietly grown through countless real moments that had gently shaped who they were becoming. A peaceful smile appeared on their face, one that carried relief instead of uncertainty. They realized they had spent so much time trying to define the connection that they had forgotten to appreciate what it had already given them. Your memory had become a place of calm. Even on difficult days, thinking of you somehow softened the edges of their worries. They had never planned for that to happen. It simply had. Don't skip, because the next realization reached even deeper. The gentle voice spoke again, almost as though sharing a secret that had been patiently waiting for the perfect moment. Notice something, they said. Every time you spoke about this person today, your expression changed before your words did. Your person froze for an instant. They replayed the entire conversation in their mind. They realized it was true. Whenever your photograph was mentioned, their eyes became brighter. Their shoulders relaxed. Even their voice grew softer without them realizing it. No one had pointed that out before. They had never seen themselves from the outside. That quiet observation touched them more deeply than anything else they had heard. Because feelings can sometimes hide from the mind. But they rarely hide from the heart. Your person gently picked up your photograph once more. This time, they didn't study it as though searching for answers. They smiled at it with quiet appreciation, almost as if they were seeing not just your face, but every meaningful moment connected to it. In that instant, something inside them settled. The uncertainty that had once filled the empty spaces was replaced by a calm confidence they had never experienced before. They no longer wondered why they kept returning to thoughts of you. They understood. Or at least, they believed they finally did. Yet as they thanked the thoughtful guide and prepared to walk through the doorway, one unexpected question was asked from behind them, a single question so personal, so quietly profound, that your person slowly stopped in the middle of their very next step, because answering it would reveal a truth they had been carrying within themselves long before they ever carried your photograph into that room. The question did not echo through the room. It barely rose above a whisper. Yet somehow, it reached deeper than every thoughtful word that had come before. When you imagine this person, they asked softly, what is the very first feeling that arrives, before your mind begins to explain it? Your person didn't answer immediately. They couldn't. Because for the first time, they realized they had always rushed to describe the connection instead of simply experiencing it. The silence became their answer before any words could. They closed their eyes for only a moment, and something beautifully unexpected happened. It wasn't a memory of a single conversation. It wasn't one special day. It wasn't one perfect smile. Instead, they felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity, as though thinking of you had quietly become one of the safest places their heart knew how to visit. There was comfort there. There was hope there. There was a peaceful feeling that never demanded attention, yet never truly left them either. Stay till the end, because this gentle discovery was leading them towards something they had never allowed themselves to admit. They opened their eyes with a different expression than the one they had carried into the room. The uncertainty had softened. The endless need to analyze every feeling had faded into quiet acceptance. They finally understood that some of the strongest emotions do not arrive loudly. They arrive through consistency. Through the simple fact that, no matter how busy life becomes, one person continues to appear in your thoughts with remarkable kindness. Your person realized they had stopped counting how many times that had happened. It had simply become part of who they were. The conversation shifted once more, but now it felt less like guidance and more like reflection. They were gently reminded that the heart often notices growth before the mind notices change. Looking back, your person saw it clearly. They had become more patient, more understanding, more willing to believe that meaningful connections deserved care rather than fear. They smiled quietly as they recognized that these changes had not appeared overnight. They had unfolded naturally, one ordinary day at a time, until they became impossible to overlook. Don't skip, because one final observation was still waiting. The photograph was handed back with great care. Keep this close, they heard, not because it holds the answer, but because it reminds you of the question that changed you. Those words stayed with your person as they slowly walked toward the door. They looked down at your picture once more, and instead of wondering whether their feelings were real, they found themselves grateful that they had finally stopped running from them. The photograph no longer represented uncertainty. It represented honesty. They stepped outside into the quiet air, expecting the experience to end there. But life has a remarkable way of continuing a conversation long after the words have stopped. As they walked home, something caught their attention that they would normally have overlooked. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't impossible. It was a small, ordinary moment, yet it reflected the very message they had just heard with astonishing clarity. Your person stopped walking, looked at your photograph again, and a quiet smile spread across their face. In that instant, they realized the most meaningful part of the day had never happened inside that peaceful room. It was about to happen next. Because someone completely unexpected was waiting to speak to them about you, and what they shared would make your person see your connection from an entirely new perspective. The quiet walk home felt different, not because the world around your person had changed, but because something within them had. Every familiar street seemed a little calmer. Every passing moment invited another thought about you. They slipped your photograph back into its place with unusual care, almost instinctively, as though it had become something worthy of protecting. The conversation they had just experienced continued to echo in gentle fragments, not demanding answers, but offering perspective. They believed the day had already given them everything it intended to. Then someone called their name. It wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic. It was someone they trusted, someone who knew them well enough to notice the smallest changes that others often overlooked. "Can I ask you something?" the familiar voice said with a warm smile. Your person nodded. The question that followed caught them completely off guard. "You've seemed different lately. Happier somehow. Is there someone you're thinking about?" For a brief second, your person almost laughed at how quickly the question found them. They hadn't mentioned you. They hadn't shared where they had been. Yet somehow, another person had already noticed what they themselves were only beginning to understand. Stay till the end, because this conversation revealed something your person had never seen from the outside. They tried to brush the question away with a simple smile, but it didn't work. "You always smile like that," the friend continued gently, "whenever you talk about one particular person." Those words landed quietly. Your person replayed countless conversations in their mind. Had it really been that obvious? Had their feelings been showing themselves long before they had the courage to recognize them? The friend wasn't trying to persuade them of anything. They simply shared an observation. I've watched you mention many people over the years, they said. But when you speak about this person, your voice slows down. You listen more carefully. You become calmer. It's almost like you're already protecting something that's important to you. Your person stood completely still. For the second time that day, someone had noticed a change in them before they had fully noticed it themselves. That realization touched them deeply. Perhaps the greatest truths are not hidden in extraordinary moments. Perhaps they quietly reveal themselves through the people who know us well enough to see what we cannot. Don't skip. Because the next discovery wasn't about what your person felt. It was about what they had quietly been doing all along. As the conversation continued, the friend smiled thoughtfully and said something that made your person glance down at your photograph almost immediately. I don't think this person changed your heart, they said softly. I think they revealed the heart you were always meant to have. Those words settled into complete silence. Your person looked at your photograph once more. Not searching for confirmation, not asking another question, but simply appreciating how naturally your presence had become part of their everyday life. And just when they believed the day's reflections had finally reached their end, the friend remembered one last detail. There is something else, they said. I almost forgot, someone mentioned your name yesterday. Your person's expression changed instantly. Because they knew exactly who that someone was. And what they were about to hear would connect every quiet realization from this day into one unforgettable moment.